The alien warrior lay motionless on the cold, metallic floor of the abandoned space station. His once mighty frame, now reduced to a broken shell, was surrounded by flickering lights and the faint hum of failing machinery. No one would help him, no one dared. He had been a legend in his prime, feared across galaxies for his unmatched strength and tactical brilliance. But that was before the battle that left him paralyzed from the neck down. His name was Kale, though few remembered it anymore. To most, he was just another casualty of war, a symbol of how even the strongest could fall. Once part of an elite interstellar army known as the Vortex Guard, Kale had single-handedly turned the tide in countless conflicts. Now, however, he was nothing more than a burden to those who once revered him. The station where he lay was overrun with scavengers and mercenaries. They looted whatever they could find, ignoring the disabled warrior out of fear or indifference. Some whispered about the curse that seemed to follow Kale, others claimed his presence brought bad luck. Whatever the reason, no one offered assistance. Kale's mind raced despite his physical limitations. Trapped inside his own body, he could do little more than think and observe. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, every breath a reminder of his helplessness. Yet deep within him burned a quiet determination. If given even the smallest chance, he knew he could rise again. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time blurred in the dim corridors of the derelict station. Food and water were scarce, but Kale's survival instincts kept him alive. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, searching for any sign of hope. And then, one fateful day, something changed. A human soldier entered the station. He moved cautiously, his boots echoing against the metal floors. Unlike the scavengers who came before him, this man carried himself with purpose. His uniform was torn and stained, evidence of battles fought and won. His face bore scars, both visible and invisible, telling stories of resilience and sacrifice. His name was Ryan, though he rarely spoke it aloud these days. Ryan wasn't there to loot or scavenge. He had been sent on a reconnaissance mission after reports of strange energy readings emanating from the station. As he explored deeper into the labyrinthine structure, he stumbled upon Kale. For a long moment, Ryan simply stared at the alien warrior. Despite Kale's current state, there was an undeniable aura of power around him. It was as if the very air vibrated with untapped potential. Ryan knelt beside Kale, studying him closely. "Who did this to you?" Ryan asked, his voice steady yet tinged with anger. There was no response, only the soft glow of Kale's eyes meeting his gaze. It didn't take long for Ryan to realize the gravity of the situation. Here was a being who had once commanded armies, now utterly defenseless. A pang of empathy struck him. In another life, under different circumstances, Ryan might have ended up in a similar position. War had a way of humbling even the strongest. Without hesitation, Ryan made a decision. He couldn't leave Kale behind. Not because he owed him anything, but because it was the right thing to do. As Ryan began gathering supplies to stabilize Kale, he couldn't shake the feeling that this act of kindness would change everything, for both of them. Ryan worked quickly, his movements efficient and deliberate. He rummaged through the scattered debris of the station, searching for anything that could help stabilize Kale. The alien warrior remained silent, his glowing eyes following Ryan's every move. Though he couldn't speak or gesture, there was a quiet gratitude in his gaze, a flicker of hope amidst the despair. The first challenge was finding food and water. Ryan scavenged what little remained from the station's ruined storage units. Most of the supplies had been picked clean by looters, but he managed to find a few nutrient packs and a half-empty canteen. It wasn't much, but it would keep Kale alive for now. Next came the task of addressing Kale's injuries, or at least making him more comfortable. Ryan wasn't a medic, but years of combat training had taught him basic field medicine. Using scraps of fabric and salvaged materials, he fashioned a makeshift sling to support Kale's torso. It wouldn't restore mobility, but it might ease some of the strain on his body. "You're not going to die here," Ryan muttered as he worked. "Not if I can help it." Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, as though questioning Ryan's motives. Why would a human, a stranger, risk his own life to aid an alien who had nothing left to give? Ryan didn't offer an explanation. Maybe it was because he saw himself in Kale, a soldier broken by war, clinging to whatever dignity he had left. Or maybe it was simply because no one else would step up. As night fell over the desolate station, Ryan lit a small fire using fuel cells he'd scavenged earlier. Its faint orange glow illuminated the darkened corridor, casting long shadows across the walls. For the first time in days, Kale felt warmth, not just from the flames, but from the presence of another living being. Despite their differences, a fragile bond began to form between them. Ryan spoke softly as he tended to Kale, sharing fragments of his own story. He told tales of Earth, of battles fought under alien skies, and of comrades lost along the way. Kale listened intently, his sharp mind piecing together the human's words even though he couldn't respond. Hours passed, and Ryan eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. Exhaustion had caught up with him, leaving him vulnerable. But Kale remained vigilant, his heightened senses alert to every sound. Even paralyzed, he was still a warrior at heart. It was during this tense vigil that trouble arrived. A group of scavengers stumbled into the station, their laughter echoing through the corridors. They were armed and dangerous, their faces twisted with greed. One of them spotted the dying embers of Ryan's fire and called out to the others. "Looks like we've got company," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with malice. Ryan jolted awake, instinctively reaching for the blaster holstered at his side. He cursed under his breath. He hadn't expected anyone else to show up so soon. The scavengers approached cautiously, their weapons drawn. There were 5 of them, each one larger and more menacing than the last. "Well, well," said their leader, a wiry man with a jagged scar running down his cheek. "What do we have here? A human playing nursemaid to a cripple?" Ryan stepped forward, positioning himself between the scavengers and Kale. His stance was firm, his expression unreadable. "You don't want any part of this," he warned, his voice low and steady. "Walk away while you still can." The scavengers laughed, clearly unimpressed. "Big talk for someone outnumbered," the leader shot back. "Hand over your gear, and maybe we'll let you live." Ryan's grip tightened on his blaster. He knew he couldn't take all 5 of them in a straight fight, but surrender wasn't an option either. As the tension mounted, Kale's thoughts raced. Though unable to move, his tactical mind was still razor-sharp. He analyzed the situation, calculating angles and probabilities. If only he could communicate with Ryan. And then, inspiration struck. Using what little control he retained over his facial muscles, Kale shifted his gaze toward a nearby wall panel. It was old and rusted, but it housed a power conduit, one that could be overloaded with enough force. Ryan noticed the subtle movement and followed Kale's line of sight. Understanding dawned on his face. Without hesitation, Ryan fired a single shot at the panel. Sparks erupted as the power conduit exploded, plunging the corridor into darkness. The scavengers shouted in confusion, their flashlights cutting through the blackness. In the chaos, Ryan moved swiftly, taking advantage of their disorientation. He tackled the nearest scavenger, knocking him to the ground. Another swung wildly with a crude melee weapon, but Ryan sidestepped the blow and retaliated with a precise strike to the jaw. The leader tried to rally his men, barking orders in a panicked voice, but fear had already taken hold. One by one, the scavengers fled into the shadows, unwilling to risk further confrontation. When the dust settled, Ryan stood victorious, but barely. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, and his breathing was labored. Still, he turned back to Kale with a wry smile. "That was close," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks for the assist." Kale's eyes gleamed faintly, a silent acknowledgement of their shared triumph. Though they hadn't exchanged a single word, they had formed an unspoken partnership, a fragile alliance forged in the heat of battle. But their respite was short-lived. As Ryan tended to his wounds, he realized the explosion had attracted unwanted attention. Alarms blared throughout the station, signaling the arrival of something far more dangerous than scavengers. Somewhere deep within the structure, machinery roared to life, and heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. "They know we're here," Ryan muttered, his voice grim. "We need to move." Cale's eyes widened slightly, a hint of urgency flashing in their glow. Time was running out. Gritting his teeth, Ryan hoisted Cale onto his shoulders. The weight was immense, but he refused to falter. Together, they set off into the labyrinthine corridors of the station, pursued by an unknown threat. Unbeknownst to both of them, this journey would lead to discoveries far greater than either could imagine. And as they ventured deeper into the heart of the station, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that saving Cale might just save himself as well. The station's corridors stretched endlessly before them, a maze of rusted metal and flickering lights. Ryan moved as quickly as he could, his muscles straining under Cale's weight. The alien warrior was heavier than he looked, his dense frame built for combat rather than comfort. Yet Ryan pressed on, driven by adrenaline and sheer willpower. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder, mechanical whirring and heavy footfalls reverberated through the walls. Whatever was following them wasn't human. Ryan didn't need to see it to know that much. The unnatural rhythm of its movements sent chills down his spine. "Hold on," Ryan muttered between breaths, though Cale couldn't respond. "We're not done yet." Cale's eyes darted around, scanning their surroundings with practiced precision. Despite his paralysis, his mind worked furiously, piecing together possible escape routes. This station had been abandoned for years, but remnants of its original purpose lingered in the form of ancient maps etched into the walls. One such map caught Cale's attention, a faded blueprint depicting an emergency exit near what appeared to be a maintenance bay. Ryan noticed the subtle shift in Cale's gaze and followed it to the map. Understanding dawned on his face. Without hesitation, he adjusted their course, weaving through narrow passages and dodging obstacles left behind by decades of neglect. The air grew colder as they descended deeper into the station. Pools of stagnant water reflected the dim light, and the smell of decay filled their nostrils. Every step echoed loudly, betraying their position to whatever hunted them. Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't afford to panic, not now. Finally, they reached the maintenance bay. It was a cavernous room filled with dormant machinery and tangled wires. In the center stood a massive door marked with the universal symbol for emergency exit. Hope surged within Ryan as he hurried toward it, only to find that the control panel beside the door was shattered beyond repair. "Damn it!" Ryan growled, slamming his fist against the wall in frustration. They were so close, yet still trapped. Cale's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. His gaze shifted to a nearby terminal, its screen flickering weakly. Though outdated, it might still hold some functionality. Ryan caught the hint immediately. Setting Cale down gently, he approached the terminal and began tinkering with its exposed circuits. Time seemed to slow as Ryan worked. Sweat dripped from his brow, mingling with the grime coating his hands. The sounds of pursuit drew nearer, each metallic clang sending a jolt of fear through his veins. But he refused to give up. With a final twist of a wire, the terminal sputtered to life. A holographic interface projected into the air, displaying a series of options written in an unfamiliar language. Ryan glanced at Cale, who responded with a slight tilt of his head. Somehow, Cale communicated which commands to select using subtle eye movements. Together, they navigated the system until the massive door groaned open, revealing a path to freedom. But their relief was short-lived. As they stepped through the doorway, they found themselves in a long, narrow tunnel leading upward. Harsh winds whipped through the passage, carrying with them the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic. At the far end of the tunnel loomed a figure silhouetted against the faint light of the outside world. It was tall and mechanical, its body covered in jagged armor plating. Glowing red optics scanned the area, locking onto Ryan and Cale with predatory accuracy. This was no ordinary drone, it was a sentinel, a relic of the station's past, designed to eliminate intruders without mercy. Ryan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no way they could outrun it, not with Cale unable to move. Desperation clawed at him as he searched for a solution. Then, an idea struck him. one born of desperation and a sliver of hope. Kale, Ryan whispered urgently, lowering his voice so the sentinel wouldn't detect them just yet. Can you still access your neural link? Kale's eyes flickered briefly, confirming that he understood. Though paralyzed, his advanced biology allowed him to maintain a rudimentary connection to nearby technology. It was a risky gamble, but it might be their only chance. Positioning Kale near a console embedded in the tunnel wall, Ryan activated the interface while keeping one eye on the approaching sentinel. Its footsteps thundered closer, each impact shaking the ground beneath them. Time was running out. With painstaking effort, Kale focused his consciousness, reaching out to the sentinel's systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the machine hesitated, its glowing optics dimming slightly. Ryan held his breath, praying that Kale's gambit would work. Suddenly, the sentinel froze entirely, its joints locking in place. A low hum emanated from its core as internal systems overloaded. Sparks erupted from its chest plate, followed by a deafening explosion that sent shards of metal flying in all directions. When the smoke cleared, the sentinel lay motionless, defeated. Ryan exhaled sharply, collapsing to his knees in relief. That actually worked, he said, laughing despite himself. Kale's eyes gleamed faintly, a hint of pride shining through. But there was no time to celebrate. The tunnel was unstable, weakened by the sentinel's destruction. Cracks spread across the ceiling, and chunks of debris rained down around them. Ryan grabbed Kale once more, hoisting him over his shoulder as they sprinted toward the exit. Just as they reached the threshold, the tunnel collapsed behind them in a cascade of dust and rubble. Bright sunlight poured in, blinding after the darkness of the station. They emerged onto a desolate landscape, a barren wasteland littered with the ruins of forgotten battles. For a moment, Ryan simply stood there, breathing in the fresh air. Freedom felt intoxicating after days spent trapped underground. But their journey was far from over. Somewhere in the distance, a fleet of ships hovered ominously on the horizon. Whether friend or foe, Ryan couldn't tell. One thing was certain, though, Kale's presence had changed everything. What started as an act of compassion had evolved into something greater, a partnership forged in adversity. Together, they had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. As Ryan adjusted his grip on Kale and prepared to continue their trek, he realized something profound. Saving Kale hadn't just been about doing the right thing. It had reignited a spark within himself, a sense of purpose he thought he'd lost long ago. And as they ventured further into the unknown, Ryan knew one truth above all else: they were stronger together. The wasteland stretched endlessly before them, a desolate expanse of cracked earth and jagged rocks. The air was dry and biting, carrying with it the faint scent of ash and decay. Ryan trudged forward, his body protesting every step as he carried Kale across the unforgiving terrain. Despite the alien warrior's immense strength in better days, his weight was a constant strain on Ryan's already exhausted frame. Kale remained silent, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger or salvation. Though unable to speak or move, his mind worked tirelessly, analyzing their surroundings and calculating probabilities. He knew they couldn't keep moving like this indefinitely. Sooner or later their bodies, or luck, would fail them. Behind them, the ruins of the station smoldered quietly, a grim reminder of the threats they had narrowly escaped. But ahead lay only uncertainty. The fleet of ships hovering on the horizon offered no answers. Their purpose was unclear, their allegiance unknown. Were they friend or foe? Refuge or another battlefield? Ryan paused briefly to catch his breath, lowering Kale gently onto the ground. His shoulders ached, and his legs trembled beneath him, but he forced himself to stay focused. "We need to find shelter," he said aloud, more to himself than to Kale. "And water. Without those, we won't last long out here." Kale's eyes flickered in agreement. Even in his incapacitated state, he understood the gravity of their situation. Survival wasn't just about evading enemies. It was about enduring the harsh realities of the environment itself. As if in response to Ryan's words, the wind picked up suddenly, whipping sand into their faces. Through squinted eyes, Ryan spotted something in the distance, a cluster of structures half buried in the dirt. They looked ancient, their crumbling walls weathered by time and neglect. It wasn't much, but it was closer than anything else. "Let's check it out," Ryan muttered, hoisting Cale back onto his shoulders. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he pushed through the pain, driven by sheer determination. When they finally reached the ruins, Ryan discovered that they were remnants of an old outpost. The buildings were dilapidated, their interiors stripped bare by scavengers long gone. Still, there were signs of recent activity, fresh footprints in the dust and discarded ration wrappers scattered around. Someone had been here recently, though whether they were still nearby remained uncertain. Ryan set Cale down inside one of the larger structures, using debris to create a makeshift barrier at the entrance. It wouldn't stop anyone determined to get in, but it might buy them some time if trouble arrived. Once Cale was settled, Ryan began searching the area for supplies. He found little, just a few scraps of food and a nearly empty canteen, but even small victories mattered now. Every calorie counted, every drop of water precious. As he sifted through the rubble, his hand brushed against something metallic buried beneath the dirt. Digging deeper, he uncovered a small device resembling a communicator. Hope surged within him as he examined the object. If it still worked, it could be their ticket to rescue, or at least a way to gather information about the fleet on the horizon. Returning to Cale, Ryan showed him the device. Cale's eyes widened slightly, and he gave a subtle nod, indicating that he recognized its potential value. Activating the communicator proved challenging. Its power source was nearly depleted, and the interface was damaged beyond easy repair. But Ryan refused to give up. With Cale's guidance communicated through subtle eye movements, they managed to bypass the faulty systems and access a weak signal. Static crackled from the device, followed by fragments of voices speaking in unfamiliar languages. Ryan adjusted the frequency, hoping to find something intelligible. Finally, a clear transmission broke through the noise. "This is Captain Voss of the Eclipse Vanguard. We are en route to Sector 9-7 for reconnaissance. Any survivors in the vicinity should respond immediately." Ryan's heart raced. This was their chance, a lifeline thrown unexpectedly into the chaos. He pressed the transmit button, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. "This is Ryan, a human soldier stranded in the wasteland near coordinates 42.6 by 17.3. I'm with an injured alien warrior who requires medical attention. Requesting immediate assistance." There was a pause, during which Ryan feared the message hadn't gone through. Then, the voice responded. "Understood, Ryan. Hold your position. We'll deploy a shuttle to retrieve you. Estimated arrival time, 20 minutes. Relief washed over Ryan, but it was short-lived. Cale's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on the entrance to their makeshift shelter. Ryan turned to see what had caught the alien's attention, and froze. Figures emerged from the shadows outside, their silhouettes distorted by the swirling dust. They were armed, their weapons glinting ominously in the dim light. Scavengers, or worse. Ryan cursed under his breath. Their presence here must have attracted unwanted attention. Now, not only were they vulnerable, but they also risked losing the opportunity for rescue. He glanced at Cale, whose expression conveyed a single, unspoken command: do whatever it takes. Gripping his blaster tightly, Ryan stepped forward, positioning himself between the intruders and Cale. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "Help is on the way. You don't want to start something you can't finish." The leader of the group chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "Help?" he sneered. "Out here, help doesn't exist. Hand over your gear, and maybe we'll let you live." Ryan tightened his grip on the blaster, his mind racing. He couldn't fight all of them, not alone. But surrender wasn't an option either. Not when freedom was so close. Just then, the sound of engines roared overhead. A sleek shuttle descended rapidly, kicking up clouds of dust as it hovered above the ruins. Bright spotlights illuminated the scene, forcing the scavengers to shield their eyes. From the shuttle's speakers came a booming voice. This area is now under the protection of the Eclipse Vanguard. Drop your weapons and disperse immediately. The scavengers hesitated, their bravado crumbling in the face of superior firepower. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Ryan let out a shaky breath, lowering his weapon. Moments later, the shuttle landed, its ramp extending to reveal a team of armored soldiers. They moved with precision, securing the area before approaching Ryan and Kale. Their leader, a tall woman with piercing green eyes, introduced herself as Commander Lyra. "You're lucky we intercepted your distress call," she said, her tone professional yet tinged with curiosity. "What brings a human and an alien warrior to this godforsaken place?" Ryan exchanged a glance with Kale before answering. "It's a long story," he admitted. "But right now, all that matters is getting my friend the help he needs." Commander Lyra nodded, gesturing for her team to assist. As they carefully lifted Kale onto a stretcher, Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't alone. They had allies, or at least people willing to offer aid. As the shuttle ascended into the sky, leaving the wasteland far below, Ryan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He had started this journey out of compassion, never imagining where it would lead. But one thing was certain: saving Kale had changed him in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. And as they flew toward the unknown, Ryan realized that their bond went beyond mere survival. Together, they had faced impossible odds, and together, they would face whatever came next. The shuttle's interior was stark and utilitarian, its metallic walls lined with blinking consoles and glowing panels. Ryan sat stiffly in a corner, his body aching from the strain of their journey across the wasteland. Kale lay on a medical stretcher nearby, surrounded by members of the Eclipse Vanguard's medical team. They worked quickly, attaching monitors to his still form and administering treatments that Ryan couldn't fully comprehend. Despite the noise and activity around him, Ryan felt oddly disconnected, like an observer watching events unfold from afar. His mind replayed the moments leading up to their rescue, the scavengers closing in, the sound of the shuttle's engines roaring overhead, and the weight of Kale's life resting squarely on his shoulders. It had been a gamble, a desperate bid for survival, but somehow, they'd made it through. Commander Lyra approached him, her armor gleaming faintly under the ship's artificial lights. She crouched beside him, her piercing green eyes softening as she studied his weary face. "You look like you've been through hell," she said simply, her voice devoid of judgment. Ryan chuckled dryly, running a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "Feels about right," he admitted. "But we're alive. That counts for something." Lyra nodded thoughtfully, glancing toward Kale. "Your friend, he's not just any alien warrior, is he?" Her tone carried a hint of curiosity, but also caution. Clearly, she recognized the significance of rescuing someone like Kale, even if she didn't yet know the full story. "No," Ryan replied after a moment's hesitation. "He's special. Stronger than most give him credit for even now." He gestured vaguely at Kale's prone form. "If you're wondering why I risked so much for him, it's because he deserved better than being left behind." Lyra raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Not many humans would go out of their way for an alien, not one they barely know, anyway. Ryan shrugged, unsure how to articulate what drove him to act. Compassion? Duty? A sense of justice? Maybe it was all those things, or maybe none of them. All he knew was that leaving Kale to die hadn't been an option. Not for him. Before Lyra could press further, one of the medics called her over. She excused herself, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. He watched as the medical team tended to Kale, their movements efficient and practiced. Though unable to move or speak, Kale's sharp eyes tracked their every action, betraying a quiet awareness that unsettled even the most seasoned professionals. As the shuttle continued its ascent, Ryan noticed the fleet looming closer on the horizon. The ships were massive, their sleek designs hinting at advanced technology far beyond anything he'd encountered before. Whatever the Eclipse Vanguard was, it wasn't just another ragtag group of mercenaries or scavengers. They operated with precision and purpose, an organization with resources and influence. Ryan's instincts told him to remain cautious. Rescues like this didn't come without strings attached. Still, he couldn't deny the relief that washed over him as the reality of their situation began to sink in. For the first time in days, they were safe, or as close to safe as they could hope to be. Hours later, the shuttle docked aboard the flagship of the fleet, a colossal vessel known as the Obsidian Dawn. Its corridors were bustling with activity, crew members moving briskly between stations as orders crackled over intercoms. Ryan followed Commander Lyra and her team, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the operation. They brought Kale to the ship's medical bay, where doctors equipped with cutting-edge technology took over his care. Ryan hovered anxiously outside the treatment room, unwilling to leave until he knew Kale was stable. Eventually, Lyra placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "He's in good hands," she assured him. "Let them do their job. In the meantime, there are questions we need answers to." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed to accompany her to a briefing room deeper within the ship. The space was dimly lit, dominated by a large holographic display projecting maps and data streams. Lyra gestured for Ryan to take a seat before launching into her interrogation. "Start from the beginning," she instructed. "Who is he? Where did you find him? And why were you willing to risk your life for him?" Ryan hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Ultimately, he decided honesty was the best course of action. He recounted their harrowing escape from the station, describing the scavengers, the Sentinel, and the fragile alliance that had formed between him and Kale. As he spoke, he saw flickers of understanding, and perhaps admiration, in Lyra's expression. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. "That's quite the story," she mused. "And you're sure he can't communicate verbally?" Ryan shook his head. "No, but he's smarter than anyone gives him credit for. He helped me disable that Sentinel back at the station. Without him, we wouldn't have made it out alive." Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the holographic map hovering above the table. "We've heard rumors about him," she admitted after a pause. "Kale, the paralyzed warrior. Once a legend among the Vortex Guard, feared across galaxies. Now," she trailed off, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. Ryan frowned. "What happened to him? Why was he abandoned like that?" Lyra sighed heavily, her expression grim. "Politics. Betrayal. War has a way of turning heroes into liabilities. From what our intel suggests, Kale fell victim to a power struggle within the Vortex Guard. When he became injured, they saw no use for him anymore. To them, he was expendable." Anger flared in Ryan's chest. The thought of such callousness disgusted him. Heroes didn't deserve to be discarded like broken tools. "Well, they underestimated him," he said firmly. "Even paralyzed, he's still capable of incredible things." Lyra smiled faintly, impressed by Ryan's conviction. "Which brings me to my next question. What do you plan to do now? You saved him, but the galaxy isn't exactly kind to strays." Ryan hadn't thought that far ahead. All he knew was that he couldn't abandon Kale, not after everything they'd been through together. "I'll figure it out," he said finally. "For now, I just want to make sure he gets the help he needs." Lyra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But understand this. The Eclipse Vanguard doesn't operate out of charity. If you stay with us, you'll owe us. Are you prepared for that?" Ryan met her gaze unflinchingly. "I've faced worse odds." Satisfied with his answer, Lyra stood and extended a hand. "Welcome aboard, soldier. Let's see where this path takes us." As they returned to the medical bay, Ryan felt a renewed sense of determination. Saving Kale had been the start of something bigger, something neither of them could have anticipated. Together, they had defied impossible odds. And whatever challenges lay ahead, Ryan knew one thing for certain. They were stronger together. The days that followed were a blur of activity aboard the Obsidian Dawn. Kale remained in the medical bay, undergoing a series of treatments designed to stabilize his condition and assess the extent of his injuries. The ship's doctors marveled at his resilience, noting that even in his paralyzed state, his body exhibited signs of extraordinary strength and adaptability. Advanced scans revealed neural pathways still intact, suggesting the possibility, however remote, of partial recovery. Ryan spent most of his time by Cale's side, refusing to leave unless absolutely necessary. He wasn't just a caretaker, he was a protector, guarding the alien warrior against any who might underestimate or exploit him. Though Cale couldn't speak, his eyes conveyed gratitude and trust. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, forged not only by shared adversity but also by mutual respect. Commander Lyra checked in regularly, updating Ryan on their progress and probing for more details about Cale's past. Each conversation deepened her understanding of the situation, and solidified her belief that Cale was far more valuable than anyone realized. Whether as a symbol of resistance or a tactical asset, his presence could tip the scales in favor of those willing to stand alongside him. But the galaxy was vast, and loyalties were often fleeting. As word spread of Cale's rescue, whispers of interest and danger began to ripple through the fleet. Not everyone viewed the paralyzed warrior as a hero. To some, he represented a relic of a bygone era, a reminder of battles better left forgotten. Others saw opportunity, a chance to harness his legend for their own gain. It was during one such tense briefing that Ryan fully grasped the stakes. Gathered around the holographic display, Lyra and her senior officers debated the next course of action. Some argued for keeping Cale hidden, protecting him from potential threats while they figured out how best to utilize his skills. Others advocated for making his survival public, rallying support among factions who revered his legacy. "We can't keep him locked away forever," one officer argued. "If we play this right, Cale could unite fractured alliances and turn the tide in our favor. And if we don't," another countered, "he becomes a target, a liability we can't afford." Ryan listened intently, his fists clenched beneath the table. They spoke of Cale like a weapon or a pawn, reducing him to nothing more than a means to an end. It infuriated him, but it also reinforced his resolve. If anyone was going to decide Cale's future, it would be Cale himself. And Ryan intended to ensure he had that choice. When the meeting adjourned, Lyra pulled Ryan aside. "I know you're protective of him," she said, her tone measured but firm. "But understand this, decisions are being made above both our heads. Whatever happens next, you need to be ready." Ryan nodded grimly. "Just make sure he's part of the conversation. He deserves that much." Meanwhile, Cale's recovery progressed steadily. While full mobility remained uncertain, experimental treatments began restoring limited function to his upper body. Small victories, like twitching a finger or turning his head, were celebrated as monumental achievements. For someone who had once commanded armies, these tiny acts of autonomy felt like reclaiming pieces of himself. One evening, as Ryan sat beside Cale's bed, the alien warrior managed to lift his hands slightly off the mattress. His movements were slow and deliberate, but unmistakable. Ryan grinned, leaning closer. "That's it," he encouraged softly. "You're getting there." Cale's glowing eyes met his, conveying a mixture of pride and determination. Though unable to vocalize his thoughts, his message was clear: "I'm not done yet." As the days turned into weeks, Cale's growing strength coincided with mounting tensions within the fleet. Reports of rival factions mobilizing reached the Eclipse vanguard, fueling fears of an impending conflict. Lyra called an emergency meeting, bringing Ryan and Cale into the fold despite objections from some of her advisors. "We're running out of time," she announced, pacing before the assembled group. "Our enemies know we have Cale. If we don't act soon, they'll come for him, and us." Ryan stepped forward, his voice steady. "Then let them come. We've faced worse odds before." Lyra raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by his confidence. "And what do you propose we do?" Ryan glanced at Cale, whose sharp gaze mirrored his own resolve. "We fight. Together." The room fell silent as the weight of Ryan's words sank in. This wasn't just about defending themselves, it was about proving that heroes, even fallen ones, still had value. That legends weren't defined by their defeats, but by their ability to rise again. With renewed purpose, the Eclipse vanguard prepared for battle. Ships were retrofitted, weapons calibrated, and strategies devised. Kale, though still recovering, played a crucial role in planning, using his tactical genius to anticipate enemy movements and identify weaknesses. Through subtle gestures and eye movements, he communicated complex strategies that baffled even seasoned commanders. When the enemy fleet finally arrived, the Eclipse vanguard was ready. The ensuing battle was fierce, with ships clashing in fiery displays of destruction. Amidst the chaos, Ryan fought alongside Kale, who had been fitted with a rudimentary exoskeleton allowing limited mobility. Together, they led a daring assault on the enemy flagship, exploiting vulnerabilities Kale had identified. In the heat of combat, Ryan realized something profound. This wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that compassion and courage could overcome even the darkest odds. By saving Kale, and standing by him when no one else would, they had ignited a spark of hope in a galaxy drowning in despair. When the dust settled and the enemy retreated, the Eclipse vanguard emerged victorious. But the true triumph wasn't measured in ships destroyed or lives saved. It was in the bond between two warriors, one human, one alien, who had defied the odds and rewritten their destinies. As Ryan stood beside Kale on the bridge of the Obsidian Dawn, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them, he knew their journey was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person stepping up to change everything, for themselves, and for the galaxy.